Hey everybody, this is my last video in this little mini series on advanced sales techniques. And in this video, I'm going to explain to you how to close three or more times without making your prospect angry. Now, this is a very, very common complaint or concern or barrier that I have when I'm talking to salespeople. I'm explaining to them my philosophy of closing. My philosophy of closing is I want to close at least 3 times on every single sales appointment. In other words, if that person has all of the information that they need to make a decision, and if you believe that the decision they should make is a decision to go with your services, I believe you should always close at least 3 times. Okay? Now, let me state those 2 things again real quick to make sure I'm being really clear here about when to use the tactics I'm going to describe in this video. Remember what I said. Once they have all the information that they need to make the decision, not the information they think they need. Once they have all the information that you know they need to make a decision, right? That's number 1. And number 2, if you truly believe that the decision they should make is to go with your services. That's very important, okay? If they have all the information they need, but you know deep down that this is not the right decision, then tell them it's not the right decision and move on. Have integrity, all right? Have honesty, have transparency. But assuming those 2 things are there, now we need to close them. Well, as I talk to salespeople and I say, man, you got to close 3 times, they're like, James, I closed 1 time and they just about kicked me out of the store, you know? If I try to close a second time, I don't know. You know, maybe the first time I can get away with it, but I try to close again after they say no to me, boy, I'm there. I don't know. That sounds risky, right? What's missing? Well, what's missing is what we've been talking about the last 2 weeks. It's these buffer statements, okay? Really, there's never more of a clear picture of when you need a buffer statement than this idea of closing multiple times. If you can learn how to close multiple times without making people angry, that is, in my opinion, that is almost the definition of a top sales representative. If you said, James, what is the one thing that separates the top 1%? I'm talking about salespeople I know personally that make $30, $40, $50, $100,000 a month in this industry, 7-figure incomes, as individual reps. How on earth are they able to do that, right? What are they doing? How are they closing 300, 400, 500 merchant accounts? I talked to a rep that 1 year, a few years ago, closed 600 merchant accounts in 1 year. 600. He had a team, not salespeople. He closed 600, but he had a team of people doing some telemarketing, scheduling some appointments and things like that. But he closed 600 last year. I can't remember. He just sent me a LinkedIn message. I think he told me he closed over 300 last year, working 3 days a week. Okay. So how on earth, how do they do this? Well, if you ask me what's the main thing that separates them, honestly, it's that they close so many times. They want to get the deal. And they close several times. But here's the thing. If you were with them, you would be like, it doesn't seem like they're closing that hard because people are still pretty happy. Even the ones they don't sell, they're not like angry with each other very often. It's usually pretty cordial. How are they able to do this? Well, they're using buffer statements. So let me give you an example. So I'm going to walk you through what I consider the 3 stages of closing, or the 3 attempts that I like to use. And I'll tell you how I use buffer statements with each of them. Okay. So the first one I'd like to do is the permission close. So the permission close is where you're asking for permission to sign them up, okay? Now, even there, I like to generally use a buffer statement. So the closing line might be something like, with your permission, I'd like to go ahead and get the paperwork started so we can get the ball rolling and move things forward. And then just be quiet and see if they give you permission. However, I wouldn't say that just right off the bat. Instead, I would probably do something like this. I'd probably do a buffer statement before. And again, as we've talked about in other videos, it's going to depend wildly based on the person I'm dealing with, their emotional state, my emotional state, what I'm trying to sell them, and all of that comes into play. But I might say something like, let's say it was dealing with Susan. I would say, Susan, again, I want to just thank you so much for the time that you've invested today in meeting with me. I know you have a million other things that you need to do. And so I sincerely appreciate your time today. Now, I'm actually really confident in everything that we've talked about, that this is going to be a great value for you. I'm confident that we can make this work and that we can give you the value that you're looking for. And so with all that in mind and with your permission, I'd love to go ahead and take a few notes on the paperwork so we can get the ball rolling. That's a permission close. Notice the buffer statements I said before. Notice the way I thanked her. I've talked about this in the other 2 videos. Some of you literally will go through an entire sales presentation, even closing the sale, and you will still not thank that merchant. It's amazing. I've heard this on numerous sales calls on the phone, seen it in person, and I'm always like, wow, you're losing so many sales because you don't have any positive momentum. Thank them for their time. When I go into a merchant, if it's like, say, an appointment, there's a pre-scheduled appointment, the first thing I do is thank them. Boy, thank you so much for agreeing to meet with me. I'm a local business owner just like you, and I'm busy just like you, and I know how difficult it is to carve out 15 minutes or a half hour to talk to somebody. I really appreciate that. I want you to know I'm definitely going to be using the time wisely today, so let's jump in and let me talk to you about a couple things. That's the first thing I say if I've got a pre-scheduled appointment. I want to sincerely thank them for their time. That's important, right? Thanking them. But as you move towards the close, thank them again for their time. Now they've actually given you time. Thank them again. What is that going to do? That's going to give you positive momentum. See, here's the thing. And this is getting into like some really deep sales psychology that I think will really help you, but you're going to have to really pay attention and follow along. Do you understand that, like, in order to tell somebody no, do you understand that like takes a little piece out of you? It takes a little bit of your energy from the day. It's hard. Now, for some people, it's not as hard as it is for others, okay? Here's the thing about it. Business owners are the same way. They're very different like that. Some of them is really easy to say no. Some of them it's really hard. But here's the thing. Even those where it's easy for me to say no, do you know what makes it a lot harder? Is if I really like the person, Oh man, I really like this person. I feel good about them. I feel like we have a connection. Why? Because I know if I say no to this person, I know that in some ways I am damaging or lessening that connection that I have with them psychologically. Now, of course, in reality, a lot of times no is the best thing you can say and people are fine with it. But, there's something about us where it's hard to say no. Now, it's not hard to say no if it's somebody that you don't like, right? Then it gets actually pretty easy to say no. So, here's the thing though. If you can become a person that they like, they're going to have a much harder time saying no. So that's why we thank them. When you say thank you to somebody, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate that. What does that do? That makes them like you better at the end of the pitch, which is what you want. And now it's like for them to say no, it's like, oh, I got to say no to this nice person who I really get along with and kind of seems to like me, right? So that's one thing there. Okay, let's talk about moving past that though. Now we've closed one time. We've got them in a good positive place, but they say, we really need to think about it, right? How are we going to close there? We're going to use a buffer statement, okay? I certainly understand where you're coming from. And let me just say this, I would never want you to make a decision that you're not comfortable with. Let me just throw one other thing out though, real quick. Now we maybe are going to use our closing with making it personal with confidence. So now I might say something like, I can tell you that nobody wants your business more than I do, et cetera, et cetera. But see, I'm going to use that buffer statement first. Well, then they're going to say, well, the thing is I really need to whatever. I need to check with my accountant. I need to talk to my business partner. Whatever the real objection is maybe now comes out. Well, I want to close one more time. So what am I going to do? I want to make them feel like I am done. And then I'm going to remember something and come back in. So I'm going to use a buffer statement like this. Hey, I totally, that's a really valid reason. And I totally get where you're coming from with that. Again, I think that's really wise of you kind of thinking along those lines. Again, I definitely am going to want to follow up with you. Let's actually set up a time. How about I follow up with you on Thursday at 4:00? Does that sound good? Yes, that sounds good. Great. You know what though? One thing I just thought of, if I was able to do this, would that make you feel a little bit more comfortable about moving forward? Just a thought. Do you see what I'm doing? Now I'm closing again. It's that third attempt. But those buffer statements, getting good at that, getting good at getting them in the right emotional state instead of just saying the line is going to have a huge difference. So I hope these 3 videos have been a help to you. Many of you have been selling for a long time. These are more advanced concepts for you. Take these advanced concepts out in the field, experience them, try them out. It's going to take a while to get good at them, but if you do get good, you're going to be at the top of your game.